All righty, so if you're ready, we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Today is, I can't believe it's already March 2nd, Wednesday, and it's 6:02, or should I put it at 6:03? Since technically we're starting. 6:02, 6:03. And we are ready to start our monthly board, Issaquah Equity Board meeting. So I'll provide you with a little bit of housekeeping rules for us just to make sure that we help everyone have a good experience here because we are doing virtual meetings as a result of some of the COVID protocols that we've experienced. So first and foremost, we're going to ask that everyone please speak clearly and pause frequently just to help if we need any interpretation. And I don't think we have our interpreters tonight because Christina's not here. Mute your microphones when you're not speaking. And if you have some technical issues, please just let us know so we can help you through those. Alrighty, and I want to give everyone just a quick second here so we can move into our roll call. I know that Christina is not available tonight. However, if you could just give us a quick here if you're here, and we'll kind of go from there. Megan Reichley.
Here.
Thank you and welcome. Elisa Stewart. I see you. Thank you. Lorna Gilmore. Thank you. Helen Keybinge. I always butcher her last name. I'm so sorry. And I think she's not here for tonight. Lucretia Shoto, who is also excused from tonight. Or no, I'm sorry, not Lucretia. She's here, isn't she?
I don't see Lucretia here quite yet.
No. Okay. Well, I haven't heard anything on her, so I'll assume that she might be joining us late. Ray Manahan.
Here.
Thank you. Tony Curry. I noticed he was not here as well.
Nope, I'm here.
Oh, you are here. Okay, great. I see you. Okay, welcome. Sorry about that. I didn't see you right away. Thank
No,
you.
it's all good.
All right, and then you have Shay Fleming, and that's me. Jacob Rubenstein, are you here?
Here.
All right, and Preeti, Madi Pan. Am I saying that right, Preeti?
Modi Pan.
Modi Pan. Thank you. And Kelly Munn.
Here.
Thank you. We're happy to have everyone here tonight. I believe we do have a quorum, so we are ready to go ahead and start. We will take a brief moment to look at the agenda. If you haven't already, has everyone had a moment to look at the agenda for tonight? Alrighty, does anyone have any suggestions on changes that we need to make?
I may have not seen it on the agenda, so it may be there, but I would love a debrief on the event that was held.
Yes, and I don't think it was actually written in. However, we did plan to debrief on the event. So no worries there. But Monica, do we need to notate that for tonight's agenda?
It's going to be included in the second agenda item on the one that we will just discuss, like how we do community engagement and cultural conversation. So we will include that there. Yeah,
Okay,
thank you. That's
perfect.
a great suggestion anyway. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Well, if we have a consensus on any other changes, I'm sorry, let me back up here. Do we have any other changes that we need to make? I don't see anyone questioning themselves, so I think we'll go ahead and assume that aside from the debrief on the cultural conversation, we have an agenda that's set. And the words escape me for the correct phrase I need to announce.
Shay, I think you're good. You don't need to announce anything. You can just move perhaps to the approval of the minutes for the agenda.
Yes, I'm sorry. That's the wording I was looking for. Let's go ahead and approve the minutes unanimously with the, I guess, notification that we'll have a debrief on the cultural conversation.
Yeah, so the minutes in your packet, you also have the minutes from last last month's meeting, and so those are the ones that perhaps you would like to review for a minute, and if there are no corrections to the minutes, then definitely you can approve them unanimously, or if there are any corrections that you propose to the minutes, then, but it sounds like there are no corrections,
I
right?
don't think we have any corrections at this point.
Yeah.
All righty,
Yeah.
with no corrections, then we can approve the minutes unanimously. All righty, so first on our agenda for tonight, we are actually going to do a review of the proposed options, and Stephanie, who has so graciously joined us tonight, is going to present that for us. Stephanie, are you ready?
I'm ready, thank you. Well, I think I'm ready if Monica's my co-sharing of PowerPoint tonight, so we'll tag team this a little bit.
Give me just a moment. Yes.
Awesome, thank you, Stephanie. We're so happy to have you again tonight.
Thank you. I am really happy to be here. I'm glad we're continuing this conversation. Okay, I see the PowerPoint up. So, and I did I hear correctly that our interpreters are not online tonight, so I will talk slow. However, not as needed as much as if we had interpreters. Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure because I know we need to ensure for that when they are here. So. Okay, so we are here this evening to discuss the conversation that we started a month ago today, February 2nd, I believe, on a equity board framework. Here to talk to you tonight to really facilitate a conversation. I'm going to go ahead and have Monica advance the slides so I don't give too much introduction before the next slides probably say the exact same thing. So we're returning tonight to seek your input on the creation. We hope to get to a place of piloting and implementing an equity framework in the city, but we're really interested in your input into this process. Next slide, please. So we will be looking for your direction at the conclusion of tonight. We're really wanting you to provide feedback on the proposed equity framework models that we showed you this far. I'm going to, remind you of those. I think they were in your packet. And then decide on next steps. Next slide, please. So it was February 2nd, to keep myself honest here, that we were talking about a couple of different specific items, work related, that the city has worked on to date. At the February 2nd meeting, we spent quite a bit of time reviewing the history of the equity training for city employees and city council. Before we called the meeting to order tonight, we were, some of us were talking about the Treliant assignments. So you all have seen some exposure to some of the things that the city's staff have seen so far. We started to talk and we summarized the work conducted on the equity framework to date. I know that was kind of towards the end of the meeting last time, so we kind of somewhat rushed a little bit to at least give you the background, but we're really here tonight to really get more into the weeds of that. Next slide, please. So just to recap, we did present two equity framework options, both what we call a step model and a postcard model. I think those are names that we've internally given those two types. We had looked at the market. We're always looking at what is everybody else doing? What, do we need to create a wheel here? Do we not? Let's take the best of what's out there and make it relevant for Issaquah. And so we introduced a few things that we had gathered in this process. This is the step model that Seattle has implemented. Next slide, please. Renton has a step model. Next slide, please. Portland, and if I'm not mistaken, Portland uses a combination of both the step model and the postcard model. Oh, and that's the next slide, Monica, thank you. So also some postcard models. This is Portland. The next slide shows us one from Channon Kelly Ray, who we had acknowledged at the last meeting that the city is currently consulting with for training and other things as a chief equity officer, where we don't have that full-time position on staff currently. Also in the next slides, we have an example from Benita Horn. I think many of you know these consultants and the work that you all do, but also both Channon and Benita have presented to City Council, and we walked a little bit through that. But they've given us examples of tools as well. Next slide, please. So really the heart of what we really want to get to tonight and what we're seeking your input on, and I'd love to facilitate a conversation around, is which equity framework proposed do you prefer and why? Monica, has told me a little bit about, various backgrounds amongst you all that bring you to this committee. And I think you all have probably in your travels seen a bunch of different options and have input into that. So, we presented two things, STEP and postcard and some samples. But which equity framework do you prefer and why? And then what other information do you need from us or the administration before we're asking you to provide a recommendation and input to the mayor and city council so that we advance this work in creation of a framework? And I'm gonna pause there because I know that was kind of a brief summary, but I think we have a couple questions and comments.
Yes, Preeti, if you're ready, you can come off mute and go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. And Stephanie, I really appreciated the presentation of those different models. My question, as I think about the different frameworks presented here, is really wanting to understand, how do you all see using this framework? Like, is it for proposed legislation, for programming, for budget proposals for new investments? Just trying to get a sense of how you see using it so we can, get a sense of how to advise here.
Sure. That's a really good question because I'm not sure we know what we don't know. I imagine that there's probably a combination here, and I would really like to know, input. I think the administration would like to see input from this board on what you see that vision to be as well, because I think we're in the space where we get to collaborate together to build what that is. I can tell you from some original conversations with council, they liked the idea that there is a tool within the city so that administration and staff, as we are looking at programs and just all the different business that each department does. We run very different lines of business in the city, that we have a tool that the internal staff can use and then have used a lens or a framework so that then when that work then goes before them as the legislative body, that they then have a tool. And is it similar? Is it different? I think that's where we get to create this. So, I would love the input from you all. If you've used examples of this, if you've seen what works well, what maybe doesn't. But I do envision that, that we could adopt one or multiple tools dependent upon who the audience is, so long as we understand we're all rowing in the same direction. I hope that gives you some bit, but we haven't pre-baked that.
Thank you so much for that response, Stephanie. Preeti, I hope that answered your question. I just had a quick comment because I personally like the STEP model just because I think it speaks to the psychology of people, how we like to see things in steps and in an order that we can follow. And I also think it gives us a rubric to self-check when we do implement those into processes like lawmaking and things like that. So I'm hoping that that may be our option. However, I'm open to all options.
You know, one thing that I do want to add too is just that comes to mind is, you know, this is continuous. It doesn't mean we adopt something and we're, you know, it's in stone forever, because I think that, you know, no matter what we do, we make some recommendations and, you know, we improve as we go. And so, you know, I know that sometimes a starting place of a little simplicity and some piloting and testing goes a long way. So I think if we put, you know, this is Stephanie opinion, and I want yours more than and offering my own, but I do think that you know, there is a space for something that is very, you know, easy to understand and usable in a space that we haven't had something in Issaquah yet. So I want to offer that perspective, you know, because I think there's a long, you know, you can look at a Seattle and a King County, and they've had programs and things in place for a really long time and have been doing this a long time. And so I think there's some value in creating something, but making it user friendly, you know, for us starting and advancing this work.
Thank you, Stephanie. And we have a question from Ray, if you're ready.
I am. Thank you, Stephanie, for coming back. If I were a question and just a comment, as I scanned these again, because I enjoyed getting to understand these models last month, the Portland one stuck out to me just because of its simplicity. One, it's able to capture things in a very easy manner in page 16. And then once we do that, we're able to dive in a little bit more with some of the details on page 17. And the other, more of a question, is because these cities have had a head start from us, I'd be curious to see if we do select one, come to a consensus on some of the successes that they've had and some of the challenges. And then obviously with the differences between our just size, right, of city, comparing an Issaquah to a Portland or a Seattle, I'm sure there's lots of complexities that we might not be exposed to. So by understanding what's going on there, can we just ask ourselves, is that really going on here? And this is something that we need to be aware of. So again, just from my opinion, the Portland one stuck out, but the ability to ask additional questions based on what they've done thus far and compare it to our community would be of interest to me.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. You know, that would take some time, which we, you know, I think one of the things that, you know, one of the questions I posed is, what all do you need from us to, you know, to get to a space where we're ready to present something to City Council? And so a takeaway for me tonight is, if we would like some of that data from other cities and what works well, we'll need the time to gather that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ray, for that question. That was a really great one. Does anyone else have any questions or comments that they'd like to present? Thank you, Kelly. Please come off mute and join us.
I'm sitting here. There are probably people here who are more experienced at this than me, but I would say I have not worked under a framework in the past. We kind of did, and not very well, was because of implementation problems. So how you do it, to me, is way more important than probably the framework itself. So I'm just going to say that. And I don't feel qualified in saying what others should be doing. To me, they should be deciding. Whoever's, because it's, to me, since I'm unclear on who's using it, I mean, we should be using it also. And I've been toying with, should we be using one of them right now? So I'm trying to sort out, is it in the best, I'm not sure why we're doing it and the staff themselves are doing it, because they're the ones who have to do it.
No, Kelly, I think that's a great point. Stephanie, do you have a response to that? And then I think we have a comment from Preeti.
You know, I'm struggling with a comment on that one, Kelly. It is absolutely a great point. I want to go back to something you said and maybe just kind of ask for those of you that have used this, because this is learning ground for me too. Certainly as a HR professional, and we look at equity from a certain perspective. Absolutely, that's embedded in a lot of what we do in HR. But when we're talking about programs versus hiring or other things, I don't have that direct experience myself. And so, you said, there's some on this call that maybe do and maybe have applied a framework. And I'm just curious if, for those on the call tonight that have used a framework, and if you have input to what has worked well, some lessons learned. It kind of, goes back to, Ray's question in terms of asking other jurisdictions. So I think the foundation of a framework from my perspective is asking a lot of questions, right? Just in general. Okay, what's before us? Who's affected? How could this, it's kind of those 5 whys: what, where, who, when, why, how, our decisions. And so I think I would really like to know who maybe has used one, what has worked well, and do we need to go seek more input?
Thank you for that, Stephanie. And I think that's a lot for us to think on. I know Preeti has a comment, and then we'll follow that with Monica, and we'll see if we can come up with a solution here.
So, Stephanie, in response to your question, I work in a jurisdiction that has a tool like this. It's similar to the STEP models. And I think this is what prompted my first question, which was like, how do you see using this? Because it can be, I think my observation of its use is that it can be overly burdensome in terms of like doing inadequate or inappropriate equity analysis. And so I think, and I think figuring out in what context to use it, and then doing that trial and error, testing it out, so then you all can figure out, what makes sense for certain programs, services, investments, whatever that it is that you would like to apply this framework to. I think fundamentally, like, the tool shouldn't be a replacement for really having equity thinking baked into how you do the work. So sometimes it takes the tool to build that muscle in the practice so that you don't need to really have an explicit tool anymore. So it's a little chicken and egg, but I think the tool will help as part of the journey. So I would say I personally like, actually, both, like what Ray was saying, both of those Portland models, the STEP model as well as the postcard model, because I think that there is, as part of an anti-racism or an equity and social justice journey, there's also a need to do some internal reflection on how you're approaching the work as you do the work. And I like how that the postcard model of the Portland Urban League gets to that. But I think in terms of simplicity to follow, especially for like external related policies and programs, the Portland STEP model might make the most sense. So I could see it vary depending on what you're applying it to.
Really great. Thank you for that. And I think that is kind of, you said it much better than what I was trying to say in terms of like starting small and building as we go and piloting some things and figuring out what works, right? So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Preeti. And I see Lorna and Alyssa both have comments. So Lorna, if you would please come off mute and go first, and then Alyssa, you will follow, and then followed by Monica.
Hi, everyone. So in my work, we recently, about 3 years ago, we've been doing equity work in the district. About 3 years ago, we started with that. And it was
Just really quickly, I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time hearing Lorna. Are others? Okay.
Yes, I think we're all struggling to hear you a little bit.
Okay, let me see if I can increase my volume. Can you hear me now? Is that better?
That's a little better.
Getting much more sound. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And my what I was saying was we've been doing equity in the district for about 5 years, and it was only about 3 years ago that we adopted an equity framework. And that's because, and so this is going to, I believe, Kelly's comment as to who makes the framework, and how, like, should they be making their own framework versus somebody else. But we realized that as a department in making the framework was really helpful because they needed more guidance. And so giving a framework that everyone could follow and everyone was on the same page was really helpful. And so I really think that having a framework to give the organization to start out with is a great step towards this work. Also, I really like the step model from Portland because it's very detailed. So it's a lot of scaffolding. And you can have something a little bit less scaffolded to your questions, less cumbersome, so to speak. But the thing is, until the organization and until people within the organization are very familiar with working with and thinking and having equity as part of the, as having equity as part of their normal part of their thinking process. And it's not intuitive to many people right now. So to help train them and to help make it more of an intuitive process where they kind of know what kind of thoughts to have, I think having something more detailed is better. And that's why I like the framework, the Portland step model, just because it really asks you to think about all of these different things. And so until the organization has become more, it's more part of a second nature, we need something that is more robust and more detailed. And as Stephanie said, over time, we can change that. But honestly, over time, what's going to happen is we're going to internalize those steps, I think. And in the equity framework, the other one someone mentioned, that it depends on how you follow it, how you use it. And what we've had to do is train on how to use them, what it looks like. So it is a lot of training on what that means and how that looks like and what questions to ask, so that it is really the following, and it meets the heart of the purpose of equity framework, rather than just check equity, saying, oh yeah, I did it. It's not really robust enough. So doing that training for the framework is going to be as critical as creating the framework. With very often people don't know what that means and what that would look like for their situation in their department. Because each department is going to be using this, and that's what we notice. As each department uses it, the people within it are at different levels in their equity journey. And so it's really hard for them to look at it with that eye unless they're all using the same framework, and then we're working alongside with them, go through that framework for the first couple of instances.
Thank you. Wow, there was a lot in there that I think was really good information. As you were talking, I'm reminded that City Administrator Bob Kowitz says that people really support, which they themselves get to help create. And so I think that's a reflection of, a lot of what you just said in asking those internal questions, along with asking the equity board, along with asking the council, that it's a really cohesive effort, right? But I do think there's value in starting with a recommendation for something and coming back and continually asking ourselves, is it working? Is it working in the way it needs to be meaningfully working, not just to have a toolkit, right? So thank you for all of that, Lorna.
Thank you so much, Lorna. And Alyssa, are you ready?
Sure. Really briefly, I just wanted to say that I think Kelly made some comments earlier regarding those of us who have not used the framework, and I would be one of those people, and also feeling a little bit like I'm not quite qualified to make that determination. I think it might help me to better understand if we, just had some more examples of ways in which we would apply each of the frameworks, what it would actually look like, something a little bit more concrete, to understand that And to Preeti's point earlier, just to also probably help us to make sure that whichever framework is chosen doesn't become overbearing, by having just some practical examples of us actually using either of the frameworks. Thanks.
So, Alyssa, thank you. I have a question because one of our key questions is, what does this equity board need to really make a recommendation to the council to move forward? We all came to you with what has brought us to this point and date so far, and that included that the city council was able to do an equity framework training. Sounds like amongst this team, there are some that have used one, and we've shown different models. But I guess I pose the question back to you: do you find, would you find that if we offered this team to have that same training, whether we use Shannon or Benita or whomever gave the council the same training, and to use some real practical examples, if that would be really beneficial to this team in an effort to train you all to be able to, give that recommendation in a meaningful way. So I'd be curious to know if this team really thinks that that would be a beneficial thing to be able to give a recommendation.
And Tony, did you want me to say your comment, or would you like to give it to us?
Sure, I don't mind giving it to you. Yeah, I was just saying that, I think having that framework, having that tool, I think it'll be highly beneficial, but it's kind of one of those things that I guess we won't know until we actually start utilizing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Tony. I also think it's important for us to recognize that this is a sort of living document. So it's going to evolve and change as we continue through our steps in this work. And having been one of those people that has an idea of how these frameworks are used, I think that it's more important that we focus on what the end goal is for the framework versus the initial steps, because the initial steps are going to change as we use them. And we may find that it's not a great framework to use during lawmaking, or we may find that it's a great framework to use during any proposal. So it kind of just really depends on what we start with, and then we can develop that process to evolve to something that we can use universally. And I didn't see any other comments, but I see some people thinking. Do we have anyone else that has a comment or a question? Yes, Alyssa, please.
Sorry, you weren't seeing it in the chat.
Yes,
I
I'm
just
sorry, I
wanted
missed
to,
it.
respond back to Stephanie, your question about training. Yes, I think for those of us who have not used the framework before, I think that any type of training that you could direct us to would be helpful.
Thank you for that. I want to make sure you all have the tools you need before we, present tools to others that we were not super confident in ourselves, right? And so, in whatever way we can help you with that, I want to make sure those things are in place, because it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? And so I think that's important for us to keep in mind.
All right, and Preeti, I see you have a comment as well.
Yeah, so I think, so Stephanie, I was kind of reflecting on your question just now. I think, so, and you've heard from the group, like, it's kind of hard to imagine how the tool could be used without seeing it in action. So I don't know if that means we need to kind of give a go ahead now, or whether there's an opportunity to perhaps kind of test it in a couple of situations, and then we could see maybe a write-up of how the process was followed. And I think just kind of seeing how it would be applied in a real situation would help us understand the value that it could provide, and help us really give some more concrete feedback. So I would say like that. And to, I think the second question you had asked, like, what do we need in order to move forward? I think that that's probably something I would say I would need to be more helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Preeti. And Monica, I know you've been patiently waiting. Would you like to come off mute and give us your comment?
Thank you so much, Shane. No worries at all. And board members, it's just so great to listen to your questions and great comments. I think my brief comment is a little bit about the fact that this is a new board, and I had a chance to meet all of you before starting and launching the board. And I think it's just it's such a pleasure to listen to you as you work so well together and as you make recommendations, and you're just so professional, and it's just so nice to hear that. And I think my words of encouragement are, please don't be afraid to ask what you need in order to take a decision. And also don't feel that you need to be an expert to provide your input. Equity, I feel like it's such a important topic, and it covers so much, right? What you bring to this board is your personal or your professional or both experiences, right? And so you are the ones to provide an equity lens on various topics. This is one of them, right? We are probably gonna have at some point, we are gonna hear from transportation, and we might also hear from our development. We are gonna hear from different fields that you're always gonna feel like, I'm not an expert in that. And I think my just note of encouragement to you is, yes, ask for what you need to take that decision, but also don't be shy in bringing your equity lens. Like from that equity lens, I loved Kelly's comment and Lorna's comment. Yes, like you don't want to do things without the people who are going to be involved, right? So those are the exact comments that we as staff are seeking, and Stephanie is seeking, and other staff will be seeking from you. So that was all the comments, because it's like, I see how humble you are and yet so professional. And it was just like, please don't be shy. Don't be afraid. Ask those questions. They're all great questions, and you bring so much to the table. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Monica. I think those words of encouragement will definitely help the team. Go ahead and take the chance, and the worst that can happen is that it doesn't work the way we planned it. And we move forward and we try again with something that works better. We've all seen plans that we thought were good initially and didn't necessarily work out. So I think that keeping our minds open to the fact that we can always change these things is important. So thank you, Monica. I appreciate that. And Helen, thank you. I see you're here. So did you have any questions or comments at this point? Thank you. All righty. Does anyone else have questions or comments? This is such a great topic, and I know it's really hard. So we want to hear from everyone.
So I'm wondering if we should do the Portland model ourselves on this.
Kelly, I think that's a great idea. I mean, we don't know what we don't know until we try it. And if we can develop a model that works for Issaquah based on the Portland model, we win, and no one has to do a whole lot of hard work. We don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel here. We have some really good examples that we can follow.
I said Portland because that's what kept coming up, right? People had stronger feelings than I about what was good. And I think it would be awesome for us to go through the process ourselves, because then we know what we're talking about.
I love it.
To add on to your thought, Kelly, I think that it is a really good balance between, it allows us to be really flexible in having enough detail to reach all situations, but also kind of create our own framework to fit our community, to kind of go on off of what Ray was saying earlier. So I think this would be a really good starting point to kind of pilot that plan further in the future for us.
Thank you. Great comments. Everyone else, please feel free to join in.
I was seeing a lot of thumbs up. Can I even take Kelly's suggestion? One thought further, if I can, it's tongue twisting. What if, because I feel like this is morphing to, okay, we want a training. There's a general census, we kind of like the Portland. Now let's try that out. Based on Monica's comment of, the work that, could come before you coming from very different areas in the city with very different topics. If we do kind of target that as a sample that we train on, that we take two very diverse bodies of work and try it a couple of times, say, because if you try it on one thing and it works well, and then you go to apply it somewhere else on an entirely different topic, like, whoa, this didn't go quite the same way. So just to kind of have that contrast and comparison on two different areas of the city. I don't have fully baked exactly what those two would be. I think our consultants, that would do some training could offer us that opportunity. I think that when Benita walked us through something, she gave a recruitment example. When Shannon walked us through something, she gave us parks board kind of decision. So those were very two different distinct things. And I think there's value in different topics. Would you find that as well if we were to structure such a training for you?
Looks like we have lots of thumbs up going on.
Well, and Shay, I gotta say, she says HR topics are always a great start. I mean, I'm kind of biased there, but but yeah, no, I'm kidding.
It's easy to relate to. Let me say
Absolutely.
that.
Yes.
All of us have at one point interviewed for something. All of us at one point have had a point where we didn't feel included, or we felt like we were leading the charge and we wanted to bring others in, I'm sure. So I can say that I believe that that's a great place to start and something that we can all relate to.
Great. Okay, I know we had scheduled about 45 minutes of time. It's 6:44. I want to make sure I, walk away with all the input and questions answered. But I do believe I got the direction that I needed in terms of what you all need in order to make a recommendation, in the days and weeks and months ahead to City Council. And that starts with a training. I think it's an opportunity for you all to connect and use something in a couple different topics. But we also got some really good feedback on what we sense to be kind of the one that stuck out. So I think I have what I need, but I guess I would just, before you're able to get onto your other agenda topics, just want to make sure if there's anything else that anybody has input to, and if I can answer any questions. All right, well, we'll have to look at a date. We'll have to figure if that's your regularly scheduled meeting in, boy, we're already at March, so that's April, isn't it? So if that's our regularly scheduled meeting in April, I'll work with Monica, to communicate with you all as I, contact a couple of trainers. I guess that's my other question. Do you have a preference on a trainer?
I would say no, just
because
because I think that you all already chose your trainers and we should be learning the same from the same person that's also teaching you. So that way we kind of know what context we're learning in, and we're not getting different information from different trainers. So I would be on board with that, considering that that work has already been done.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we have those resources. I think there's a lot of value in us, learning along the same lines. And so I'll certainly tap into those resources that we have in place. if you have other input, please feed that through Monica. She can reach me, or you're always, I'm always available on city email. Always a pleasure to come visit. I appreciate the time, and I will see you again in short order. Boy, a month flew by, so I'm sure the same will be true at the next meeting. So I appreciate all your time.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. We appreciate you joining us. You're welcome to stay if you'd like, or drop off if you feel comfortable.
Thank you.
All righty. If we are ready, we can actually, let's see, is everybody doing okay right now? Do we need to take a quick break before we move to the next agenda item? I see head nods no. All right. I think we can go ahead and move forward then. Our next agenda item is community engagement proposed conversation with Tony. Tony, would you like to step in and start the conversation, or I guess restart the conversation for us?
I guess I can do that if I can figure out how to hit the mute button or the unmute button. But yes, I guess let's continue on with that conversation. Give me a second and I'll share my screen here and we'll continue on with that conversation.
Tony,
Yeah, go ahead.
Tony and Shay, I apologize for interrupting. Shay, would you be okay if we pause just for a moment for public comments?
Yes, that would be great. Do we have some members?
I would like to check in with someone. We have one attendee, and I would like to check if they would like to make a public comment. Julian, welcome. Are you interested in making a public comment tonight? I'm gonna unmute you, and I can also bring you up as a panelist. Welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm just listening in tonight.
Okay, thank you. So no interested in making a public comment then?
No.
Okay. Okay, welcome. Thank you for being here. Shay, we do not have other residents who have signed up for public comment, so I think that can be it then for tonight.
Awesome, thank you. Well, we thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Again, we'll go ahead and try to move to the next agenda item. Tony, are you ready?
I am ready, Shay.
Yes. All right, let's get started.
All right, let's get started. So when we last talked in our community conversation, we talked a lot about, of course, equity. But give me a second. I'm having a little bit of an issue with sharing my screen right now from that last presentation that we gave. So I am having a little bit of a problem here. So give me just a minute.
Tony, I can assign you the role of and sharing the material if you would like. Before you go into that detail, would you like to have a higher level conversation on how we have community engagement and the conversations, or would you prefer to go through your presentation and then we leave the
yeah, let's have a higher level
conversations
conversation. No, let's do that. Let's do that. Let's have a higher level conversation about the community conversations and how important they are. Excuse me. Of course,
okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Sorry about that. Okay. So, of course, we had one of our first community conversations last month. February went by so fast. Already being able to say last month for Black History Month. A number of two different community conversations. One was a panel session in which we talked about the importance of Black History Month. The other conversation, I really wouldn't say it was a conversation, more of an event. We had some fun night with trivia, with a great game, and just going through and learning some things about Black History Month. And the community conversations, I think, are very, very important to, of course, for learning, not only just learning about, let's say, each other, but also learning about our community and what they think about certain topics that may be involving in equity. And then, of course, that leads to the equity conversation that we had. I believe that was in December when we had that first conversation about equity. And so really does all lead into that lens of an understanding of what equity means to each other and to everyone. But before I begin that presentation, I'm having a little bit of a problem. I would like to actually, throw it to you guys in an open-ended conversation as far as equity, as I go through my technical issues that I'm having right now. Let me just ask a quick question. As far as equity is concerned, what is it that is important to you about equity? And then I will get this ready to go.
I'd be happy to start if no one else wants to start. I think that it's really important that equity is, I don't want to say necessarily tailored, but adjustable. Specifically because everyone's equitable needs they're not going to be the same. Um, Much like the photo that we've all seen, some people like baseball, some people don't. And so we may not need to get them, standing space to see over the fence. um, and we want to try to expose everyone to a different belief system as well. Because a lot of people choose what they want to do or what they want to see in equity based on what they know. So if we're not sharing those belief systems and giving people a better understanding of those, I think that limits how we can make things equitable.
Absolutely. Great comment, Shay.
All right. And I saw Alyssa next and then Ray. But feel free to jump in as soon as you see someone finish.
I think just piggybacking off of what you just said, Shay, it's more about going directly to that community and understanding what it is that they need rather than assuming what they need or want, so that everyone has a voice at the table. And we're not just thinking that we're being equitable by deciding for other people without giving them a voice of their own.
Very great comment. Thank you, Alyssa. And Ray, are you ready?
I am, yeah. One of the things that fascinated me about one of our earlier meetings was the sharing of demographics. What makes up Issaquah as far as the population? And from there, have an understanding of where the majority lies. And when we talk about equity, what are the needs of those communities that are larger than others? In addition to other important topics like homelessness, I'm sure the city takes this into consideration, but perhaps we can have that on our radar if we know that there's a lot of Middle Eastern families in one area, or the needs of a South Asian or larger South Asian community. So those are the things that really fascinate me, is what makes what is the makeup of our immediate surroundings. It's fun to share that.
And Ray, I just want to finish that thought by saying, what's the makeup, and making sure that our decisions are using that data. So we know that, but if we then just kind of ignore that data and make decisions that aren't consistent with that, then that's not helpful. So I agree, definitely having the data, looking at it, but then you really using that data and incorporating it into our decisions.
Yeah.
Thank you. And if Preeti, if you're ready to give your comment.
Sure. So when I think about equity, I really think about undoing the impact of structural racism over 400 years of US history. So, and I guess not just racism, but thinking about oppression of other groups of people in our society. And so that, means like I think other folks have said, raising the voices of those most impacted in our communities, and putting power and access to power and decision making in their hands for the solutions that work the best for them.
And before I speak, I'll let Megan go, please.
So when I think about equity and what that means, I think of equal opportunity, and how are we giving those marginalized minority groups that equal opportunity? What services are out there to help uplift those and give them access to all the resources the world has available? So I think that's something that's important when we're considering diversity and inclusion work, for sure.
Thank you so much, Megan. And I just kind of wanted to piggyback off of everyone in that I think it's important to acknowledge too that we aren't going to be able to terms that I use at work, boil the ocean, right? So we need to be okay with the fact that we may not be able to reach every person we're trying to reach. It is a long journey and it can be very emotional, and we need to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves as well. And having the best intent is kind of how we start. And recognizing that we may not be able to reach everyone that we'd like to reach. We just want to try to do as much as we can in the capacity that we can. And sometimes that means we may end up disappointing some people. But we have the intention of making sure that we can try to reach everyone in our community in a better way.
Yeah, to kind of add on to what you said there, I think like one of the most important things about equity, like you said, how we can't get to everyone, and so we may have to like have priorities, is that equity is like it's always changing. So we're always going to have to like reevaluate our priorities and like the specific like equity initiatives we want to take in reference to like the marginalized community. And it even kind of goes back to what Ray was saying about like evaluating the demographics around us, because like that's always changing, obviously. And so it's okay if like a step we take now in terms of equity like doesn't make as much sense in a year, and we kind of have to change our priorities and reevaluate what we want to do.
Thank you so much, Jacob. That was such a great comment. Does anyone else have any comments or questions before we allow Tony to go ahead and present for us? Such great stuff. Great work, team. Oh, and I see Tony's ready. Thank you so much.
Yes, I am ready, and my mute button is finally working correctly now. So, I think when we last talked, we were, of course, talking about when we were having our, let's say, equity board conversation about equity, so to speak. Um, we talked about the this particular slide here. You know what? I'm sorry, you can't really see what's on this slide, but we got to hear, we talked a lot about viewing the lens of equity from the lens of maybe someone who has a little bit of privilege or a lot of privilege in the case of this picture, where they're able to actually see um, what's going on in a baseball game versus someone who's got maybe a huge amount of privilege where they can see the absolute everything that's going on, and versus someone who's not being able to see anything. And then that involves, of course, a lot of, how does equity look? Does equity look like equality? I mean, this is like what the reality is. The reality of the situation is many people aren't able to view the world, to experience the world, be in the world like others. And we had a long conversation about that, and everyone gave their opinions and had some great things. We didn't get to this part here, and I think this is what with our fellow Issaquahians, I'm not sure what we called ourselves, but our fellow community, our fellow members of the community. Sometimes equity is confused, I think, with equality. And I mean, what does that look like? I'm going to just kind of, we're starting to have a great conversation tonight on equity, but what about equality? I mean, what do you see do you see equality as something that is subjective? Do you see it as something that equality exists in our culture and climate and city? Is it enough? What are your thoughts? I
Tony, I'll
can't see
jump
chat.
in.
Okay.
And I would say that we are seeing more equality for sure. There are a lot of people starting at a good point. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that we've addressed all their needs. As the picture demonstrates, the last little gentleman there, he may need an extra step that we're not providing. And it's about providing those options, I think, to make sure that we can meet everyone's needs. Everyone has the ability to feel the equity in our community, and not necessarily that we just work to make it equal across the board, because equal across the board is never going to be equal for everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's and so I can't remember who coined the phrase that basically equality is not equity. And I think, back in the 60s with the fight, I mean, I was just a little kid in the late 60s, but of course I knew nothing of it until the 70s and 80s. And the thought was always about equality, like everyone's equal, everyone's equal, everyone's equal. But yeah, in my opinion, it's like, equality it was good for its time, but it's not enough for today. Any other thoughts from anyone?
All right. I think last time when we were having this conversation, I want to say it was Kelly who made a great comment, which was tear the fence down. I don't want to be at the fence. Why are we talking about how well these folks can see over the fence when all those other people get to sit in the stands?
Right.
And I just thought that was such a great comment, and it really does speak to what we're really trying to get to. So in the stands, everyone is sitting in a seat. Many times the stands are elevated so that the person sitting, behind you, their seat is a little bit further raised so that the person in front of them isn't blocking their view. They're not all at the same level, but they're all in a position to where they can see the game, together and experience it together. Um, and I think that's where we're trying to get to, and that's where we need to get to. And that, it isn't that those seats in the bleachers are all at the same level or
Right.
equal, right? But they all afford everyone an opportunity to um to participate together.
Great comment. Any others? I can't see chat, unfortunately, so I have no idea if I should move on.
Lorna, would please come off mute.
So to me as a parent, I think I look at equality and equity in a lens of a mom. For me, I was always raised that parents should always love all their children equally. I strongly believe that, and I make sure that I never favor one child over the other. That's equality. But equity is what I give each child. One of my children, her love language is more on touch, and the other one is more on service. So I am not going to give them both the same thing. I'm going to give them what they need. So for me, equity is more about giving people and meeting people at where they are and what they need, not really giving everyone everything equally because they might not need that thing. So we're always looking, for me, when I look at equity, it's meeting people at where they are and making sure that there's no barriers for them to get what they need, artificial or otherwise, no barriers in getting what they need. That for me is equity versus
Fantastic.
Thank you, Lorna. That was a great comparison.
So before the next comment, I just wanted to bring up this particular slide because as Lorna was speaking to it, and as everyone was speaking to it before I could bring up my presentation. And this involves, of course, the reason why we want to have cultural conversations. We want to have those, I'm hoping to, we can do something like a cultural conversation, not just based on, okay, it's Black History Month or Latino History Month or Hispanic History Month or Jewish History Month. Would love to actually continue to have equity conversations and conversations that are cultural based on many different cultures. I mean, Jane Elliott had, I was watching some content that she had put out years ago. And Jane Elliott she does a lot of work in equity. She's done a lot of work in educating others to racism and to the history of the United States and where we've actually come from as a country. And she's done some great, I want to call them social experiments, but I definitely invite you guys to look her up sometime. There's a lot of great content out by her, but she mentioned something about that. She said that, the United States of America, we call ourselves a melting pot, and we really shouldn't be a melting pot. I mean, we really should be a salad bowl. If we put everything in a melting pot, I think probably a lot of people like fondue. I love love fondue. But you know, you put your all your different ingredients you might want in a melting pot. They all meld together, and they all become this one thing. But that involves in, like, you know, assimilation, right? I mean, many years ago, we never really talked about assimilation. We all just kind of came to the United States in some way, shape, or form, either by voluntarily or by force, but we're all here. Um, but we should be a salad bowl, because just like a salad, like, you know, I'm a meat eater, but I do love salad. But what's in a salad? You know, you've got your great lettuce, you've got some peppers, you've got some carrots, you've got all of these great things, maybe some croutons, and they all just kind of meld together, but they all have their own likeness and culture and greatness and weaknesses. And when I think if we can always think about equity in terms of that, then I think that, you know, whether it be racial, whether it be social economic, whether it be being able-bodied or not able-bodied, in many other different ways, whether even sexual orientation. But that's what I love about what we do and what we want to do for our community in terms of equity. But I would like to know from you guys. I mean, I kind of breezed a little bit about cultural conversations, but I want to ask you a little bit about this picture here. What do you think would be the hardest individual in this picture to convince that equity is important?
I see Alyssa's ready.
All right, it does touch on this picture. It was really a piggyback off of what Lorna was saying before, which is in terms of giving each of your children what they need, not necessarily giving them equal, but giving them what they need. And that's kind of what this picture to me speaks to, is that, you know, to me, I think of our country as a team. And I want the team to be successful. I want the whole country to be successful. I want everyone in it to be successful. And it's not helpful if I don't give each team member what they need in order to be the most successful. And, you know, while the person who isn't standing on a box, you know, might interpret that as, oh, I didn't get what they got. I think that there is a complete mind shift and culture shift that we have to do, that makes us all see each other as a team and say, okay, if we both have what we need in order to be the most successful, then we're all better off for it.
Very good, Alyssa. I like that comment.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. And to kind of piggyback off of what Alyssa said, I think the person in the front is going to have the hardest time, because much to your point, no one wants to feel like they have to give up something, even if it is for the greater good or for everyone else to have something. And that's just the nature of our society, and changing that mindset or changing those belief systems is where I tend to focus my efforts, because sometimes your belief systems may not be what you think. I often have to remind people that making room for others doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to take anything away from you. And that does still mean that there's sacrifice, but there's sacrifice on all ends. The person that needs the extra help has to reach up a little higher or has to ask a little bit more. The person that is inviting them in has to give a little more. It's like I generally kind of compare it to the introvert and the extrovert. The extrovert's ready to jump out and invite everyone in, but the introvert needs to feel a connection with that person to feel like they're welcomed. Or they need a little bit more encouragement to say, come on over, we want to hear your ideas. And that can be difficult.
Very good, Shay. You know, before the next comment, I'm just going to throw something else in there, and we're going to talk more about cultural conversations. But when I look at this picture, and I see, you know, let's say from how, let's say we started the conversation in terms of reality, and you got this gentleman that's on the left-hand side, he's got 3 boxes, right? And then the person here, well, we'll just say they've got 1 box. Nothing changed for them in terms of equity, but you know, the individual on the far left, in terms of equity, could view it like you were saying, Shay, and you were saying, Alyssa, and Lorna, you mentioned as well, could see it as like, you've given all of my boxes away. You've given like 2 of them to this other person, and just eradicated one or the other one. But how do you think that we should have cultural conversations to turn that mindset around? So we'll keep the other comment that was out there, like, which will be the hardest person. So if anyone wanted to comment on that, and but second part of the question would be, how do you have cultural conversations with this type of individual?
And I think Kelly would like to chime in for us first on that one.
This is kind of complex in my head, so bear with me. But I'm really struck with what Elisa has been saying over and over that is incredibly important. And that is that to me, it might be not the person who on the left, it might be the person we can't see who tells everybody what to do. That's the person we've got to get to. Because if we're telling the guy on the left that he's going to lose something, we're saying it in a way, we're doing it in a way where that is the result. That's a mess. If we're giving the one box to the person in the middle, but they don't even want to be there, then we've messed it up. And then we give 2 boxes to the gentleman on the far right, who is feeling now like, well, I got too much. I maybe could have done 1. You see what I'm saying? It's like the hardest person to me is the people who are really well-intentioned, but aren't thinking this through, they're not asking what is needed, to get back to Elisa's point. And that is the hardest, because there's an awful lot of us who are out there, including myself at different points in my life, who are trying to fix things and making it worse.
Kelly, that was so prolific. That's a lot to think on. Because
Yeah, that's why I
yes,
was so
we are
quiet.
all good intentioned, and sometimes good intentions don't necessarily get us where we need to go.
Were there any other comments that someone would like to jump off mute? Any other comments in chat, Shay?
Yes, I see Lorna has a comment. Please, Lorna, come off mute.
The scarcity model, I think, is the hardest. And that's exactly where I see the most number of people fight back on equity or equality. One of the things.
Oh, Lorna, let me stop you just really quickly. We're still, I'm struggling to hear you, and I really want to hear what you have to say.
Sorry, I turned my volume down because otherwise it's too loud for me. So the comment on Tony's first question about would be the hardest would be for the person who's not getting the box because of the scarcity model thought that people have. Nobody wants. Everyone believes, or many people believe, that resources are scarce, and very often when we offer resources to people, when we talk about equity, people get frustrated because they feel like some families are going to get, or some people are going to get, an unfair number of extra resources, but it should always be equal number of resources. And so scarcity, I think, is one of the biggest things, and that's what we'd always have to teach and share with the person who doesn't have a box. Why didn't you get a box and somebody else got 2? And what does that mean? So that is the hardest part. So it's more like we have to figure out how to help people get what they need and help them realize that resources are somehow not as scarce. And how do we help them understand that it exists, and especially for people or situations when resources are scarce, So what does that mean? So that, Tony, your question was really hard and something that I struggle with all the time. And people really push for equality because that's what we have been programmed to believe in this country, especially, versus equity, which is a very different concept and fundamentally underlying concept, especially in a country where it was all people are created equal. So we want to treat all our kids equally. We want to give everyone equal resources. So now what does it mean that we're saying we give people what they need? might
Yes.
not always be an equal. I don't have the best answer for that. It's just something I'm still struggling with.
Thank you so much for that comment, Lorna. You make such great points because I almost wonder if we start with equity or if we start with equality, much to similar to what Preeti said. Where do we start? Do we put the egg first or the chicken? Because I'm wondering if we, how might we make this a little bit of both, right? Can we give everyone a small box to say that it's equal and then um, allow though everyone to tell us what they need? And then to me, it's really important that we come from a place of abundance because I think we as humans don't realize how much we actually have and how much we could actually still share and still have. And that's a really hard concept to put into people's minds. Um, but I'm sorry, Alyssa, I saw you had a comment. Would you please come off mute and share with us?
Sure. So and I can't remember exactly what, Tony, your question was, but I think I remember my response to it, which was that, I think part of helping the person understand that they're not losing something is helping them understand the trade-off. So we're looking at, a very simplistic picture here. And the reality is that, by not giving that assistance, what am I doing? I'm paying more in tax money, perhaps, to fund fixing the homelessness problem because I'm not willing to give as much money towards, say, education or to mental health issues. So, I'm still paying, I'm still losing by not wanting to give that resource. I am giving a resource. It's just a question of where am I giving it in the real situations. So in other words, by not having equity and not giving people what they need in order to be successful, I therefore am actually hurting myself. I'm hurting the team, but I'm hurting myself too, because now I have to contribute even more resources to deal with other issues that are not dealt with, if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense. Absolutely.
Such a great point, Alyssa. Such a great point.
Yeah. A lot of great thinkers in our group.
So true. Please, anyone else? I didn't see a comment or a question in the chat. Monica, do you have any remarks for us?
I'm just enjoying and again just blown away by just thoughtful and insightful conversations you're having. So yeah, just once we complete the topic towards the end, would love to continue conversation with you and Tony on kind of like planning and continuing, I think, community level conversations and within the board. So I would love a few minutes to discuss that, but only once we finish this just great topic. So thank you.
And Tony, before you proceed, I'd like to just take a quick pause to just check in with the group, see how everyone's doing. Are we all okay? Anyone need a break, a bio break or anything? All right, lovely. Tony, please continue.
All right. So I think it was, Kelly who you mentioned that, basically, I think you were the first person that mentioned tearing down the walls. And I believe, Helen, you were the first person that mentioned it when we started this conversation in December. You mentioned that if the wall was just gone, that would be a perfect thing. And I agree. We want to be able to tear down the wall so that, if the wall is torn down, then no one loses anything. And whether that, I'm not sure if that can happen in our generation, maybe not the next one, but maybe the one after that. If we keep doing the work that we started to do, and we keep energizing the community with and that's why it's very important for us to have like cultural conversations within our community, and those cultural conversations like what we did in February with Black History Month, and getting the community involved in these conversations. And it's not just about learning, let's say in February about Black history, but just learning about each other, because if we can learn about each other, not just from a personal sense, but our shared history, and that, Italians are, we're all Americans, that Italians have their unique culture, people from the Middle East, they have unique, we all have our unique cultures. However, we all are striving for the same thing, is for all these walls to be torn down, to be liberated from that, so we can all view life and then experience life and be in life, the in a way that we can all not only enjoy life, but we can also enjoy each other in our uniqueness. Um, but I don't want to just preach on this. I mean, just the last question is, do you think it's possible? Do you think, and a two-part question, do you think that community conversations that we can have monthly with the community and engaging with the community, do you think that that will be helpful in one, tearing down some of these walls, but also finding out from each individual, whether it be demographic or socioeconomic demographic, like what each group needs?
I feel like I'm talking too much, but I really, really want to comment on this because I just think that I think it's hard to imagine what liberation looks like for our country because our country is constantly evolving. Um,
Mm,
and I think that when we put all these great minds together like we have here, we come up with a starting point, we come up with a goal, but that goal is forever changing. So we have to open our minds to the possibility that nothing is going to be stagnant in this work, and that we are going to have to build our resilience to continue to do it, and we're going to have to teach others to continue to do it. I often compare our work to, singing to a choir. We want to teach everyone these words so that they can mimic this song and put forth an effort to make a change in unison versus us trying to be siloed in making the change. So I I still have hope that it's possible. It's just really hard to figure out how to get there.
mhm.
And Ray, I saw you were next. Please share.
Yes. God, Tony, this is a hard one. It's just, it's a wonderful presentation. Just a couple comments. I had seen a similar presentation with my employer, a very large employer, but they didn't have, I should say our organization didn't have slide 5 and 10 on there. It was very odd. It was good conversation, but it was missing that. So I wanted to share that with you because the message is delivered differently, I guess, with different audiences. And to stick on this slide and what is possible, love it. Love the whole concept of liberation. But we live in a capitalist society where those players and that organization needs to make a profit. So tearing down a wall so folks can watch the game is going to be what did Stephanie say? It's going to be a marathon and not a sprint. It needs to be some really good valid conversations, knowing who your target audiences are. And I think we do have an opportunity to do that here in Issaquah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to my daughter's basketball game at Issaquah High School, and I get irritated that they charge us $5 to go see our child play basketball. I mean, stuff like that. It's just conversations that you need to have. But again, the capitalist society that we live in can make it that marathon.
Absolutely. Great comment, right?
Thanks.
Yes, I think that really just shows Alyssa's point. You um you don't want to give up anything, but you pay for it in another way. And and that's hard for some of us to do.
And it's interesting how each individual sees these slides, like whether it be, some people can view it and they see it from a socioeconomic standpoint. Some people see it from a racial standpoint or cultural, and others see it from a able-bodied standpoint. So it's very interesting how each individual views these slides, it's great to know that we have a great group in this equity board of great thinkers who want to get to this point. But we'll figure it out how to get here together.
That's right. Preeti, would you please come off mute and give us your comment?
Yeah, so I kind of lost my thread for a moment. So I think I was responding to Tony's question around like the cultural conversations in the community. So if I think about, the theory of change I have in my head around this work, and you have to raise awareness, you have to educate folks on like why equity is needed, starting with, systemic racism, things like that. But I think there has to be actions tied to it because, we've been talking for a really long time. So I think we have to put those conversations into action in some way. So I think that's just the one thing. I'm kind of tired of talking about things and I just want to move to act.
Yes.
I love it, Preeti. I think that's a great point. We all have to have some skin in the game, right? And be prepared to do some things in order to make these changes happen. Alyssa, I saw you had another comment, and Lorna, I saw you have one as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Tony, your question was, is it possible to get to that liberation slide? And I think we do have, I think that we have, both a positive and a negative history in this country, but I think that part of the positive history, if we look at, has been over the long term, the history of all the immigrant groups who have come here and who are now leading. And, I mean, you look at some of the leaders of our major corporations and where they've come from, where their families have come from, and what their story has been. And I think that we have lots of examples of ways in which, yes, it's possible. We have some groups today that still need to be able or enabled maybe to make that journey. But I think that we definitely can do it. And I think we have examples of groups who have actually done it. So I'm hopeful.
Me too.
And please, Lorna, come off mute. We're eager to hear your comment.
I'm still struggling as to what liberation means. And if you just take away the offense, does that mean that it's going to get better? And we've had, I can, my mind's not going to talk about actual examples, but situations where we've taken away barriers, fences, and it really didn't solve the problem because there's still certain inequities that were there. I think back on a presentation, a performance I went to watch a couple of weeks ago, where everyone had great seats, and yet right before the performance started, a really tall woman sat right in front of me, and then I couldn't see the performance that I paid for. And so, what does that mean? And I thought, well, this is unfair. As a short person, I should have been able to sit further up, in the audience. I thought, well, what about people who can't see very well? What would happen to them? And they were tall. And so there are just so many different barriers, and it goes back to the fact that not everybody is equal. We have different heights. We have different visual abilities. We have different abilities, maybe learning disabilities or different abilities. And so it is really hard to just be equal or to just give everyone, take down all the barriers if you're not actually addressing equity in the sense of meeting people as to where they are and what they need. I think no matter what, it's still some kind of equity part, the belief that equity is giving everyone access and opportunity, that still plays a role even in liberation. Because liberation just as is really not going to solve the problem for some people and in many situations. I think that's where I'm still struggling with just we do, is that the best for society, or do we still consider equity in what people need?
Thank you so much for that comment, Lorna. And it almost makes me wonder um, if we need to think more presently. We often think about what happens in the future or what we can do for the future. And sometimes that impedes our ability to help in the moment, if that makes sense. But I did see Ray's comments. And Ray, would you like to give us your comment, or would you mind if I gave it?
Oh no, please. I just wanted to share with you.
Yes, he mentioned that we should tear down the walls and fill in the holes or remove the blocks. And he was excited to do it with this group. And I think we have a great group to kind of make that happen, to put some of that action into place. It's hard to say what's going to be the right answer, but I think we don't get to any answer if we don't try.
Absolutely. And Monica, saw you raise your hand.
Thank you, Tony. Again, board members, it's just so humbling and rewarding to listen to you all. And I think speaking of action, I think this might be a good opportunity to let's talk a little bit about how do we apply everything to Issaquah? How do we move to action? I think you as a board have such an important role in this city. And I think in many ways it's up to us as a board to start turning things into action, right? And I think the city leadership is looking for us to provide recommendations, suggestions. So if allowable, I would love for us to start a little bit of a conversation on this. And so is that okay? Can I share a few thoughts on this and perhaps continue the conversation with all of you?
Of course.
Yes, please.
So I want to step back a little bit. Let's start with the beginning, right? We launched in November, and so I can't believe it's March. And I feel like time is flying. And at the same time, I feel like you as a board, you accomplished already so many things, and yet so little, right? We can look at so many different things, right? But now that you are a few meetings into this, now you are working already together. And I think initially when Tony suggested this great topic in December, I think the intent behind it, if I'm not mistaken, Tony, was on one end, it's important, we need to have these conversations, but it was also, as you were a new board, it was also intentional in helping you all learn one another, learn your thinking, how you work with one another, right? And so then at the same time, then we started adding action items. We were, asked to provide recommendations. So now before we know it, you are providing recommendations, things are happening. And that's why I would love to pause a little bit and talk about the different things that we are doing and how are we working as a board, right? So on one end, we meet once a month, and we've been receiving some assignments. We also received one large assignment from Mayor Polly in creating a gap analysis and really learning about what the city is doing internally and externally. So that is still on our topic for the next few months, for you to really learn about each of the departments at the city and about other equity initiatives in the city. So that's one bucket. And at the same time, we are also going to work on creating an actual work plan, right, for the board. So that's kind of like we are still developing that. That's one bucket. On the other end, like Tony recommended early on, there was this interest to have conversations at the board level and perhaps at the community level, either in parallel or together, on these very difficult conversations, right? And I really loved Preeti's comment on like being tired of conversations, let's move to action. And that's where, like, at the same time, like what does Issaquah need? And if I'm allowed to have my opinion, I think we need a little bit of both, right? At the Issaquah level, the community level, there are just so many different opinions, and I think there are so many pockets where we still need to have those conversations to bring people along, but I also want us to have those actions, right? So all of this starts feeling like this is another different bucket that could be one or multiple buckets on how we go about this, right? So at some point, it almost feels like overwhelming, so much to do and so little time, because you are meeting once a month. And in 2 hours, I, as a staff liaison, as I'm having requests, so Stephanie is now working with us on the framework, and we got the culture and religious calendar, and we are still trying to work on a work plan. It feels like there's not enough time, right? And at the same time, you're a volunteer board. So then how do we go about all of this? And I think it's one of the meetings, again, when we were in a rush, we didn't have much time to talk, but we did say that perhaps do we want to create a subcommittee that maybe focuses just on community engagement and maybe on these conversations that at least there's no requirement on one end to have the entire board involved because everybody's busy, but perhaps we have a small subcommittee with 3-4 members, and maybe they can work on one community conversation, just like we did with Black History Month. And maybe in a couple of months, we choose another event and we have other 3-4 board members, maybe not the same. So then one, we offer more opportunities for every member to participate, but also we don't just create heavy lifting for just a smaller number of board members. So I'm throwing out a lot of ideas on kind of like what are options for us. And then again, you can create multiple subcommittees. They don't have to be permanent. They can be just short term. You can, work on, like, maybe a subcommittee could be working on, okay, how can we turn into action things and just come back to the larger board to make recommendations. Or we can just keep it to 1 month meeting, no more, no less, no subcommittees, and just still it's going to take us a longer time to really learn about the city and create really a landscape analysis and an action plan and all of that. So I'm going to shut up because I shared so many thoughts in a few minutes, and would just love to hear your thoughts on how, now that you are, 4 or 5 months into this new board, what are your thoughts on how do we go and continue?
Thank you so much, Monica. You're so motivating. So thank you so much for that. I saw Ray had a comment first, and I think Helen also had one. So Ray, please.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. I agree. We're 5 months in, and I think action is going to be needed soon. Question and then a comment. I know Mayor Pauley brought us because she wants us to develop this, but I think we all come into this with our own reasonings for why we want to be here. Like for me, I work in healthcare, so there's healthcare equity is really important to me, and I get educated on things like that. So perhaps there's an opportunity at the next meeting to just have each one of us speak and say, what brought you here? What is it that, and then if there's a common denominator, whether that be health equity or education or homelessness, what really drove you to want to be in the committee? I think we're going to find some common denominators there, and perhaps from there start to narrow down on where the focus needs to be. But I think I want to hear from my other colleagues here what really brought them here, and where do they want us as a group to take action, and we might uncover some common denominators.
Thank you so much, Ray. I think it's so important that we definitely realign with our motivations here. That's so important in knowing our capacity for this work, because it takes a lot. It does take a lot. And sometimes it can be a little harder than it is when we start. So definitely, I think that's a great idea, and I think we should definitely do it. And I'm sorry, Helen, were you ready, or did you have a comment?
There we go.
There we go. Hi. Yes. I mean, I've had us doing some domestic stuff, in and out. But coming out from um the community, just to comment on Tony's, what are we calling community, and to what conversations are we inviting them to? I mean, just the times that we've met, and from the last one we had, how many have attended, and are we going to be preaching to the choir? Is it just going to be us, and what is the reach, and how do we make the reach wider than just us and this group? And do we start with an action that then attracts the community to these conversations without it getting heated? I just felt like the last time we had it, that was last month, the Black History Month, at some point the conversation got a little bit heated, and I personally felt uncomfortable with everyone who was in there. And if we can find a way to not make it our nature, to not make it our brand, so that even the conversations that come up in the future become attractive to the community, the wider community, and it's not just us. The next meeting we had at 7, the trivia was mostly us. Again, how are we going to attract those who don't know this stuff to then come and be a part of it? Do we start with an action that gets everybody not to think that, oh, this is a group that's going to sort of know what it's going to be, and it's going to be a heated conversation that's not going to have, or is it going to be a one action, whether it is, I don't know what it would be, but a soft landing, and then we get them in, and then we can get to whatever those heated conversations are. And then back to Monica, the committee, obviously, I think the smaller the group, the more legwork we will make. I think, again, at this time of day, we all have a long day. If we pocket in 2 weeks of a 1 hour meeting in a small committee of 3, we might move forward faster and get things done a little sooner.
Thank you so much, Helen, and I appreciate that feedback, because I don't know that everyone had a chance to see our last community conversation. And if you haven't, I would highly encourage you to do so, because I think it really taught us so much about what is actually in our community, and who we can affect and who we haven't affected yet. And to Helen, to your point, the conversation was uncomfortable at some point. Luckily, all of our panelists were well prepared, and they were armed to be able to support the conversation in a productive way. And even teach some of those who weren't necessarily ready to take in the information, which I think is important. We can't just sing to the choir. We have to have those tough conversations with those people who are going to combat our belief systems, because those are the people that are going to make the difference, and those are the people that are actually in the majority. At this point, we are the minority here. We are trying to make a change that is hard for a lot of people, and that is going to involve a lot of discomfort on all sides. I can see Helen's, discomfort with the combativeness that occurred there. But I also saw Tony's comfortability with explaining what was going on. Similarly, I saw Amber's comfortability with being able to explain that this is not just about race, or it's not just about our past, it's about our future and how we move forward. And I think that is going to put us in a place where we are going to have to constantly be learning, and we have to constantly motivate ourselves to keep fighting this fight when it's uncomfortable, when it's hard, and when it doesn't feel right, and when we're worried that people are going to be upset, because unfortunately we're just not going to make everyone happy. And I know that our goal is to see everyone happy and thriving, but I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's definitely going to be uncomfortable. Megan, please, I saw that you had a comment, and I see Tony has one too. So please join in and come off mute.
Yeah, actually, something that we're doing at Issaquah High School that was just introduced to our school, that really talks about not having arguments about what may seem as controversial or very tough topics to talk about, but really focusing on having really good conversations to gather that data of what do we need to do to improve the conditions of our society. So currently right now in the class, we're talking about the justice system and how around like police reform. And we've had really, really good conversations with the youth on what do they feel we need to do. We've also done our own research about what other places have been doing. So I just want to let you all know that, you know, the youth is actively trying to change our mindset and how we approach these different things and really getting used to the idea of being comfortable with being uncomfortable in those situations. So I just wanted to share that with y'all.
Thank you so much, Megan. And it's always such a surprise to me to see what you all are doing in high school, middle school. Like, this is our future talking here. Like, how cool is that, right? Yes, I'm sorry, Tony, I saw you had a couple of comments. Would you like to share?
Yeah, I'm just gonna piggyback off the comment you just made, Shay. Megan, like something like it must be in the water in the school districts across America because you guys' generation is so much more engaged and doing what is right than I think probably any generation that's ever existed. So no pressure, but we're hoping for a lot of from your age group, and so keep doing what you're doing. Um, so I think the community conversations are a good way to really just start bringing our work into action. It's a good passive and yet reactive way of engaging the community into this kind of work. And then because if we can't get the community on board with us, then any action we try to take in terms of equity, it's really going to be hard to digest. And I think that having a subcommittee, and however those subcommittees look, and like Monica said, I don't think it needs to be one subcommittee. I think it's probably going to have to be two or possibly three different subcommittees in some other different types of fashion on how we structure that. That can be a good way of doing this work to in Issaquah and hopefully inspiring other cities that are close to us to do the same thing.
Thank you so much, Tony, for that comment. Such great comments. Please, everyone, give us your feedback. We would love to learn a little bit more about how you feel about these community conversations, because we're leading them, right? Well, not we as just us, but at some point, we're all going to have a vested interest in some of these conversations. And I think that knowing that we're going to find so many different kinds of people that aren't necessarily represented in this group, it's going to be shocking, and we want to make sure that everyone is ready. Not only that, but we want to make sure that you're ready to bring people in with the knowledge that you have and the presence that you can bring, and I know Monica picked us all for a good reason. So we have to be able to share that with the world. And I'm hoping that we can get there pretty quickly because much like everyone else, I'm eager to take some action. Yes, and I'm sorry, I see Kelly, you have a comment. Would you please share with us?
I'm going back to Monica's original question, and that is, I definitely would do anything to help move us forward more rapidly. If it means another meeting a month, I know a lot of the commissions do meet twice a month, a subcommittee, whatever it takes, I'm in. Let me just make that clear. And then on the idea of community conversations and building on what Monica had said about our own work and how far we've come, and we have. This work is being done in Issaquah. It's really kind of interesting to watch. I mean, the school district is doing a phenomenal job at trying to do it. I mean, we've got Lorna talking about it, and I've been watching it for a few years. There are other organizations here who are. And I think that if we really were going to do community conversations in a way that's effective, we work together. We get those organizations together so that we're doing it like a system, so that everybody sees there's this system that's shifting, not just individuals. So we can do this, but we're going to need more meetings.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And I think sometimes knowing the commitment is hard because everyone's struggling with time right now. So, if you can make an additional commitment, I encourage you to do so. I'm ready too, Kelly. Let's do it. All right. And I think Preeti, did you have a comment? I saw you next.
I think Megan was ahead of me.
Oh, gotcha. I'm sorry, Megan. I missed you. Please come off mute.
No worries.
I'm
Honestly,
gonna
my
jump
comments.
in. Megan, I apologize. I'm gonna jump in because I would like, if you're okay with that, it would be helpful to hear Ray's comment. And again, I'm sorry for being the taskmaster here, especially since we have attendees. It's important they don't have access to the chat, so they can see your comments.
Yeah, that was my bad. I directed it to Megan, and I should have just asked the whole group. I was fascinated about the work that was going on at Issaquah High School. I mean, talk about a peer that may have a jump start on it because they've been focused on it before we have. Did they walk away with and Lorna, you probably have some insight into this. Did they come away with understanding where the priorities are with our community based on the work that's been done? That was the question that I posed to Megan.
Well, I think what's so interesting about the class and the way the teacher has structured it is, like me, I'm and a lot of my peers were very new to equity work and what does it really mean to be equitable and what does equality mean. And so I think we're really developing those opinions, and our teacher's giving us this format to one, pick the topics we're really getting into. We get to choose that. We kind of get to choose what are the guidelines and the boundaries we take in these really good discussions. So I think we haven't quite developed that equity lens per se, but we're working towards it. I think that's our goal. And ultimately, again, how do we have good, respectful conversations while also speaking our mind and being comfortable to have that opinion as well.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. Thank you so much for that. And are we ready to go to Preeti? And I'm sorry, I got a little lost in the conversation here. So yes, Preeti, if you're ready, please come off mute.
Yeah, so I was thinking about Monica's question around subcommittees, and I think having like a community engagement or community conversation subcommittee would be a really I think it would be valuable to have some dedicated folks just thinking about it. Earlier today, I was having a conversation with someone, and it really highlighted this idea of making sure that we're calling people in and not calling them out. And I think that takes skill and talent, and it gets back to I think Megan and other folks were talking about, like, how do you respectfully share your opinion and respectfully disagree with others in order to advance the conversation? Because if no one is willing to lean into hard topics, we're not going to make any progress. And that is so important, so hard to do, that I think, yeah, we need some dedicated energy on that. I don't think it can just happen really quickly and on the fly. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Preeti. And I just wanted to comment that I think that our team did a really good job during that cultural conversation, because there were, if you haven't seen it, you should, because there were definitely some hard topics, and there was definitely some hard feelings, and then some really soft ones that overshadowed that tough part. And that's where we make progress. Here, and I see, Tony, you have a few more comments, and Kelly has a question. Tony, would you mind if Kelly went first?
Mine's way off topic though. I'll just say it. Mine is, do we have a Ukrainian cultural group or group of people, individuals in Issaquah? And if so, what could we make a suggestion to the city to do to support them? Is the beginning. We take action.
Great question. Because I think this is all kind of top of mind for
Mm-hmm.
everyone at this point.
There's a pretty strong community of Eastern Europeans, Russian and Ukrainians, both. And we can try to reach to someone for sure to connect. Yeah. Yeah, and there are also some nonprofits supporting specific cultures. So yeah, I'm happy to do a little bit of research and try to connect with someone.
I guess my question, to be more clear, is what is the city going to do to support community members? And I understand they could have Russian nationalists here, right? I understand it's dicey. However, it's also important that we step up.
Yeah. So at this point, I think we've been in communications, our human services side of me, and we've been in communication with our emergency management department. There are conversations about supporting refugees, right? Nothing concrete at this time. We do have a couple of meetings with some of the nonprofits who support refugees and immigrants, and to look at the needs. So in the past, we've been connecting volunteers with those who support and making those connections, and at times also their allocations of funds. At this point, there's nothing concrete in place, but we are looking at evaluating that, right? And so again, I'm also very happy to do some more research and come back to the equity board if this is something that there's an interest. Definitely we can bring this forward as early as next month for sure.
Awesome. And Tony, I saw you had a couple of things. Would you mind sharing with us?
Yeah, I'll be brief since we're short on time. I was just thinking that, and I heard a lot of it from everyone commenting. I think we definitely need to actually have a multiple committees. And my thoughts would be a planning committee, which would, look at the calendar of cultural things that are going on throughout the year, and maybe planning, let's say, certain things, whether it be community conversation or not, what we're going to do in that particular month. And then another subcommittee who would be more interested in not the planning end, but more interested in the execution and being involved in that event, whatever way it looks like, after this new normal is over with, and whether that be involved in person table event somewhere or virtual conversations or whatever we decide to do. So and I guess if we're going to do that, I think it's incumbent of all of us to kind of think like, where do we see ourselves fitting into this type of mold?
Thank you so much for that, Tony. And I think that's an important distinction, that everyone know that they all have the ability to contribute in different ways. And you may not want to be on a committee, but you may be able to help execute with panelists or execute with presentations or any of that. So definitely we want to utilize everyone's talents. Monica, so you had a comment, please?
Yes, no, thank you. Great conversation and input. I'm leaving with quite a few notes here. I'm so excited to hear all the suggestions. With your approval, let's continue this conversation next month. I think it eventually is going to tie together. So I do see an interest in perhaps creating one or multiple subcommittees. Really love from the planning to the conversation side of things to the execution. So definitely, I think that's one direction. I really loved Ray's comment early on about just having an opportunity to refresh and get to know one another now that you're a few months in, right? Like, what was your motivation? What drove you to be on this board? And just seeing if there are action items that might come up that way, right? There were just, all of you had so many things about how do we attract people. I loved Helen's comments about, how do we build that that capacity to attract more people. So many things with that. And I think that also ties into, if you remember a couple of months ago, we were trying to start getting to know that landscape, right? I would like to start inviting those things that you're talking about, yes, there are things happening in the community. Let's get to know them, right? Let's invite the Issaquah Equity Cultural Group. Let's invite the student body who's working at the school district on the equity. Let's invite all those who are doing work in the community. Let's invite them and let's get to know them. So I would love to start scheduling those. I also would love to invite internally at the city, the leaders from each department, right? You had a presentation from the Parks and Community Services Director, but we have 10 other departments, right? Wouldn't that be nice for you to also really get a good understanding of what the city is doing and what are the opportunities there to create action items? So perhaps from that, this was what we are talking about. I think it's going to take another 6 months to do that kind of like informational and information gathering item, right? So I'm gonna try to put my thinking hat on. Would love to continue the conversation with all of you. I think I found it very helpful, and I think together we can come up with something. Are we okay with just continuing this next month and perhaps then really either create subcommittees or doing that? Yeah.
Yes, I think I saw a lot of hands up, so I think we're all on board. And just to kind of let you all know, it is 8:02, so we are actually approaching the end of our meeting. Did anyone else have a comment or a question, or just want to give us your feedback on how we can make our board more effective?
Just a question, Monica, is there is the city allowing in-person meetings anytime soon with the
Great question. Thank you, Ray. I was hoping that I can have 2 more minutes of your time to provide with a couple of updates and part of that staff report section of our agenda, and that was one of them. So actually, the city staff, we returned to work this week. So we are in person. The city provides for flexibility. So the minimum requirement for staff is to be, for those who can work from home, the minimum requirement is to be in the office for at least 1 day a week. There are, of course, certain departments that need to be there all the time. The next step is for city council to start providing in-person meetings, and that will happen next week. For the first city council meeting, they will be in person. And then following that, the hope for boards and commissions to provide in-person meetings is scheduled tentatively for May. Of course, we are looking into providing that hybrid model. So it's going to be both in person and online, but more to come on that. And if I'm allowed for one more update, thank you. Just wanted to update you all. If you may remember, you received an email from me a week or so ago about the cultural and religious calendar that you all helped create. Actually, we had a council presentation last night on that, and just wanted to report back that the city council was very, very open to having and starting to incorporate it as a pilot, see how it's going to work. So just wanted to give you a kudos and a big shout out that your very first item is moving along and is gonna move forward to implementation. So congratulations for that, and thank you. So there are certain action items that you already are doing, and with that, even I would love to actually, following this meeting, to forward you an email. We even just started small steps, but the city staff have an internal newsletter. We call it the Chronicle. And so we started a monthly opportunity to just send articles on what's happening for that month. So I'm going to share, we just started the one for March, highlighting Holy, highlighting Women's History Month, and also highlighting Developmental Disabilities Month. So just opportunities for staff to learn more. Just again, kudos. What you do matters quite a bit. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. Those are such great updates. I'm so excited to see we're already getting stuff done. I would ask, does anyone else have any questions, comments that they want to put out there for us? All righty. If not, I think we've reached the end of our meeting. So I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. Your work is so valuable and so important, and we're so happy you could be here. And we will adjourn for now. Thank you, everyone.